Hey, what's going on, everyone? Loki Orin here, and today's just a little bit of a different video, but I wanted to take a beat and talk a bit about something that I don't know there are many people in the Darkest Dungeon world that would talk about this except me and maybe a few other weirdos out there. Quexley, I know you're out there doing the same thing, so shout out to you. But in general, I don't think there's much emphasis in the community on the named teams. It's just a fun Easter egg, a fun thing to do. But for me, this is sort of the driving thing I do playing the game. So I just wanted to take a minute and weigh in on how I feel about the characters as it relates to this very specific project. So, first off, disclaimer and clarifications, aka what this is and what it is not. This tier list is very specific to the ongoing project I have focused around the named teams. I am attempting to beat a confession with every single named team. We're maybe a third of the way through, so I've got quite a ways left to go, but this seems like a good chance to take a beat and think about what I've learned so far. This is not intended to be a judgment of the characters overall, because, in my opinion, all the characters are viable, they all fit into their roles. There's really no bad character. So, again, before you go to my tier list and then say, wow, you suck because you say X character is C tier when they should be S tier, remember that this is in the context of very specific formations and very specific requirements. So, with that all said, here is how I think about these characters. The criteria, if you will, for how I determined this tier list. Number one, how much of a problem is this character going to be in the context of a named team? Now, this has a little bit of wibbly wobbliness to it because every team is different. However, there are definite characters I've identified that when they show up, there's an immediate flag of, okay, that character is likely to cause me some trouble. Whether it is I need to build a certain way to make sure they're supported, or that I need to be very careful about how they're used so that I don't create a negative situation. Following up to that is how well does this character fit into different roles or positions slash ranks within a team? There will be formations where you have the leper as an example starting in rank 3. That's not a good place for the leper. And that's really what we want to touch on with that. Next, how well do they support their own requirements and how dependent are they on others? I found that this one, most of the characters support their own needs, but it's an important consideration because if a character really needs a lot of, say, combo points to be really functional, if the formation we're playing doesn't generate a lot of combo points and their own kit doesn't, that's kind of a problem. Finally, next up, how well do they synergize with the other characters? This is, again, sort of perhaps more of a commentary of certain characters have interactions that really make another character shine, or they really like having another character. So some of this is how important are those synergies relative to the characters just functioning on their own. And finally, I will freely admit there are some vibes and biases in here. There are characters that I just like more or like less. And I'm sorry, I'm only human, but this is how I created the tier list. So let's get into it. All right, here we are in Tier Maker, and you can see I've got the characters' headshots arranged left to right in what is effectively order of release. And yeah, let's just get dived in with yeah, let's just go ahead and make some people, including me, if I was watching this, angry. We're gonna go ahead and take the Plague Doctor and put her right here in the B tier. This will hopefully kind of set the tone for how we're thinking about these characters and the criteria we're using. Because this one hurts. I love the Plague Doctor. She's one of my favorite characters. But the fact is she has no mobility. This is covered a little bit by the fact that Incision is usable in 3 ranks, meaning that she does have decent rank flexibility, but some of her skills, such as battlefield medicine, are restricted to certain ranks, and some of her really nice skills like plague grenade are also restricted to only the back couple of ranks. This means that she really needs to be planning to be in a rank that's built for what she's trying to do. Like her build really controls what rank she wants to be in, and since she lacks her own movement, she's dependent on her team to get that done. So it feels strange to rank the PD lower, but she just doesn't have that movement. You have to be very conscious of where the Plague Doctor is, and that can be a problem in some formations. Next up, the Grave Robber. And the Grave Robber is setting the tone for the A tier here. The Grave Robber is rarely a problem in a formation. In fact, almost never. She's easily able to find her way backwards and forwards, but really only has one role. She deals damage. That's what she does. She can do a little bit of off-tanking, but really, she just wants to be dealing damage. She offers relatively little support to the characters around her, but also doesn't ask for a lot, so it's really a very self-contained character. Because of that, there's, it's a little hard to describe synergy for a character that's so self-contained, but she does like working with the Flagellant and the Plague Doctor because of all that extra blight damage. Quite a good character. I'm always happy to see her in a formation, and her movement skills really highlight the value she brings in these named formations where you can have a character like the Grave Robber in rank 1. Next up is the Highwayman, who is also going into rank 1, but for slightly different reasons. Much like the Grave Robber, he's rarely a problem. Whatever rank he's in, he's happy to be there. And it's possible to build him with an eye to getting all the way to the front or being fine being pushed all the way to the back and staying there. Where he loses a few points is that he doesn't really move as well as the Grave Robber does. He really only moves forward 1. But that is an actual skill rather than just movement, which makes it a little bit more appealing. He doesn't mind having a dance partner. You can build him in a way where dancing with another character is quite preferable. But he's also fine just sitting in one rank and living there. So maybe I'm a bit biased. I do really like the Highwayman, but I can't really think of a lot of formations where the Highwayman was the problem, so he gets the A tier. Next up, and continuing to sort of set the tone here, we've got the Man-at-Arms in the S tier. Now this one needs a bit of explanation, at least I felt it did. The Man-at-Arms is really interesting because he has an entire path that says, play from rank 4, it's fine, in the form of Sergeant. And I think that really characterizes why he's S tier. He really doesn't care what rank he's in. He is fine in pretty much every rank, provides excellent support for the team with stress healing and tanking, and while also dealing out some respectable damage. He supports his own needs to some extent, but would love to have an extra source of combo points and healing to cover up, to cover over the amount of damage he's going to be likely absorbing for the team. He works fine as a dance partner, is able to reset the formation to the front with Hold the Line, but maybe he's not as good as some of the other S tier characters, but the Sergeant path I think gives him some bonus points because he can function from all the way in the back just as well as from all the way in the front. And that degree of flexibility means there's never a problem when the Man-at-Arms is in the formation. Next up, we have the Hellion. The Hellion is also living in the A tier. Kind of like the Highwayman, she's generally not the problem in a formation. She's able to get to the position she wants to be in. But kind of like the Highwayman as well, there's sort of a caveat there. Her main movement skill is one at a time. However, or one at a time with a toe-to-toe. However, she does have breakthrough, so she is able to move more rapidly. It's just not necessarily the skill you want to use all the time. The Hellion maybe loses a few points for really only having one role. She wants to be dealing damage and taking damage. That's her whole shtick and her whole kit, and she really wants to be in the front two ranks. But that's something she creates her own synergy for, and she doesn't really need a lot of help to do that. She has great self-healing and self-stress management and can naturally tank and deal damage without a lot of assistance. So very reliable character to have in a formation, and again, just not really the problem. Now, this is probably going to be the least surprising rank here. The Jester is an S tier, and truthfully, he should probably be a tier above, because the S, maybe the double S tier here, the Jester is never a problem. He is able to casually move from the back to the front to the back again, and will do so on demand whenever you need it. Along with that, he's also able to move other characters, meaning that no Jester comp has to worry about an ambush. There is no situation the Jester cannot fix in a turn or two. To add to that, he provides support and DPS simultaneously, which is really appealing because it means that he basically never has trouble matching his skills to the demands of the group. He doesn't really have a lot of requirements on his own. He doesn't ask a lot of the party, but is very able to set up to feed whatever the rest of the party needs. The fact is, the Jester is just the best at keeping a formation humming along, filling in gaps when needed, and providing steady, reliable damage, debuffs, and support. Next up, the Leper, and this is where this might get a little bit spicy. The Leper is D tier. Maybe that's not surprising because, look, the fact is, the Leper is frequently a problem in named team formations, especially if he is in a formation that has any sort of extensive movement in it. The Leper needs the team to be okay with him living in rank 1. He has no movement skills, and a lot of his skills lack the reach beyond the second rank. So it is very easy to have the Leper end up in a rank where he can't do anything or have very little impact in a battle. He is a very self-contained character. He doesn't ask a lot of the formation and provides some great tanking support. However, he needs the party to be okay with, the team to be okay with him sitting in rank 1 or maybe rank 2 and never moving. And it's very easy to throw that off with an unlucky roll of the dice or other characters who want to move for some reason. Look, I love the Leper, but he's a frequent member of some of the tougher formations that I've played. Next up, we have the Occultist, who finally we're going to flesh out the C tier here. So the Occultist and the Plague Doctor kind of occupy similar niches, and this is really coming down to some of the bias. The Occultist, kind of like the Plague Doctor, you can really build him to be okay from any position. Rank 1 to rank 4, you can build an Occultist that's fine being there. However, my primary beef with him is that he's not super reliable. He has very wide ranges on some of his skills, and especially his healing skill, having that ability to roll for 0 and then a bleed is really not appealing. He does carry the benefit of acting both as a DPS character and a debuffer simultaneously, while also providing healing, but so does the Plague Doctor. And that's really where I think the break point was. The Occultist and the Plague Doctor both kind of can be set up anywhere, but they want to build to be staying kind of where they start or where they want to end up. And ultimately that means that the Occultist gets the downgrade because his unreliability is charming, but makes everything a little bit more stressful. One notable thing as we head to the next character is that he does have a pretty sweet synergy package with the Runaway. You don't really care if you're putting bleeds on your characters if the Runaway is just going to turn that into more HP. Speaking of, the Runaway fills out our S tier here. Much like the Jester, the Runaway is really good at resetting a formation or getting herself back into position. She's not as good as the Jester at doing it, but she's a cut above most other options, definitely comparable to the Man-at-Arms at least. Generally, she's focusing on dealing out burn and dealing out as much of it, but she does have some other roles, including being quite a strong debuffer, which can be pretty valuable. She doesn't ask for a lot of help from the rest of the party, though she doesn't mind when there's a handy source of combo points. And she makes for a nice 1-2 punch with the Crusader and or the Plague Doctor, and really vibes with the Occultist. So in the end, I feel like the Runaway just... I can't think of a formation where the Runaway was the problem. She may have been part of a tough formation, but it wasn't because she was out of position, but because the team had other issues. Next up, we have the... hang on, I gotta scroll through my thing here. Next up, we have the Vestal. Now, the Vestal was tough because she kind of bobs for me between the B tier and C tier, but I think ultimately she ends up in the B tier because she has a little bit more flexibility, despite the fact that she lacks the movement skills. The Vestal, like the Leper, really doesn't have anything going for her in terms of movement. However, she's much better able to at least do something from all ranks. Her consecrations are usable from all ranks, I believe. I believe they're usable from all ranks in all of her paths, which is really nice. Or maybe it's just Seraph, which is just better Vestal most of the time. And her skill builds tend to either be fairly, focused either on being in the front 2 or the back 2 ranks. The point being that she has more flexibility than the Leper and is a more reliable healer than the Occultist, so that was sort of what broke the tie here. Her buffing skills and her healing capabilities are both pretty nice. Her buffing is actually fairly unique in terms of the sheer volume of output she's providing. So she fits into pretty much any team and lets other characters gain significant buffs. So it never really feels bad to have the Vestal around, but she's vulnerable to movement, which means that there are formations where the Vestal can become a problem, even if most of the time she isn't. Next up, have the Flagellant. And the Flagellant is ending up in the C tier for kind of complex for me reasons here. The Flagellant is really a lot like the Leper. He doesn't really provide any movement, but he does have better reach and flexibility. You can play him as a Maniac and have him further back in the formation just fine. He does have the ability to reach back to ranks 3 and 4 with meaningful damage. So he's definitely above the Leper. And he asks little of his team beyond tolerating his toxic behavior. And he does a pretty good job of helping the team survive. So there's a temptation to put him up in the B tier. However, I think ultimately, unless you're running him as a Maniac, he really needs to be in the front 2 ranks to be effective. And I think that sort of limits him a bit in if he gets moved back, it's a struggle to get him back up to where he is without help, or where he needs to be without help. And that takes us forward to our boy Reynold here, who is going to be up in the B tier. Now, we just talked about the Flagellant being fairly flexible but wanting to be in the front 2 ranks, and the Crusader is pretty much in the same boat. He's generally not the problem because he's able to get himself into that formation at the front where he wants to be. Holy Lance only moves one at a time, but it does mean that he's able to get forward, though Holy Lance does have the caveat that it doesn't hit rank 1 most of the time. He's capable of acting as both a supporting cast member and a key player, which makes him extra appealing. And, he more or less supports his own game plan quite well. Doesn't really need a ton of help from other characters. He does really vibe with the Runaway, helping him generate burn, which then in turn he can synergize with. So overall, just a very strong player, but he's a little less mobile than the higher tiers really ask for. And finally, the Duelist. And for those of you who've watched some of my recent videos, this may not come as a surprise, but I'm putting the Duelist down in D tier. Now, before you get your pitchfork sharpened, let me explain. The Duelist feels like she should be ranked higher. She has a ton of movement. She has the ability to move forward and back, not as well as the Jester or the Runaway, but still quite well. She provides some good debuffing, damage output, and some unique skills that you don't really get anywhere else, and she can operate from pretty much any position. She supports her own requirements and rarely requires help from others, except that is also where she falls down. She doesn't ask for much, but she demands quite a lot from the rest of the party. If she's in a formation with other characters who are fine with dancing between the ranks, or a formation that naturally resets itself, the Duelist can easily be a high performer. But by the same token, if she finds herself in a formation with characters who do not want to move, the Duelist can easily mess that formation up in ways that are very difficult to recover from. So ultimately, perhaps this has something to do with my dislike of the Duelist as a character. Her playstyle doesn't mesh with how I like to play. But I feel like the Duelist has been a part of a lot of very tough formations for me. So that's it. Here's the tier list. Hope you all enjoyed, and I look forward to hearing your feedback down below. Are there characters you disagree with? Is there something I missed or didn't consider? Let me know. Until next time, see ya.